for being here on the Super Celebration. We had 3 salvations at the first service. I've got their information in my pocket, and that's so encouraging. We've had more and more salvations recently in our services, and I thank God for that. Thank you, Wilson campus, for being here, Nashville campus, and Rocky Mount campus. We're all in here together. We were at Pastor Choco's church. They have 8 campuses. They have 6 around Chicago, one in Tampa, Florida, and one in Camden, New Jersey. And boy, were they giving it to Camden, New Jersey. They were like, man, we need to pray for that place. They were working over Camden, New Jersey. But we're so glad you're here today. And I want to share from my heart. For 2 weeks, we've been talking about discipleship. And we have titled the sermon, Who Discipled You? Because everybody who grows in their faith to a place of maturity did not get there by themselves. They had somebody, often many people in their lives that helped them get there. So in response, we're asking you to do a couple things. We ask you to write the name on the board out there of someone who discipled you. I don't want you to leave without doing that. If you haven't done it, that's a great keepsake. And it's meant to sort of build an altar of honor to those people who have helped disciple you. I know I wrote names on there, and I could have written more. Second thing we're asking everybody to do in the next month or so, join a small group. Get in a small group of people, at least one with some other Christians, because that is where discipleship often happens. We're asking you to do that. Now, week 1, we talked about the power of encouragement in the process of discipleship and what it plays. It's so critical to have encouragers in your life as you're on your journey with God. And we want Rise Church to be an atmosphere of encouragement. We want it to be a place where you have people come alongside of you saying, like we did with these parents, you can do this. Take courage. We are with you. And we looked at the life of Barnabas, one of the greatest encouragers in the Bible. The second week, we talked about the cost of discipleship. Being a follower of Jesus Christ will cost you something. And I don't want to sugarcoat it. Jesus always made people count the cost. And we gave you 5 things. Number 1 was desire. We talked about the fact that you have the supernatural power to shape what you desire. Somebody say amen. You are not an animal. You are not some just thing out there that is a victim of your desires. Through your words, through your habits, through the environments you create around you, you can have a place where your desires are shaped by the power of God. The second thing we talked about, a cost, is deny. We have to deny ourselves certain things on this journey. And I quoted my mentor, Robert Spradley, who would say over and over to us young guys who were on tracking to become ministers and leaders, he would often say, others may, but you may not. Others may, but you may not. You have to protect the anointing of God on your life. And you have to do that at times by denying things that are no longer compatible with being a follower of Jesus. Certain things just can't coexist in your life with Jesus. Can I get an amen? If you're a disciple. The third thing was just building on that, to die. Take up your cross. Jesus used the practice of a physical death to show us the power to die to ourselves and let Christ live through us. And we recognize that during Jesus' life, although he lived in a time of military peace, almost 30,000 people experienced death by crucifixion. And it was such a powerful image to his followers when he talked about dying, about carrying your cross. They knew that this was not a game. They knew that they had to be all in. And number 4 was devotion. As you begin to devote yourself to being a follower of Jesus, and then that led us right into purpose, just staying on track with God. Now today, I want to complete this with our entire church together by talking about the journey of discipleship. I love the word journey. Have you ever been on a journey? You get in the car, you don't know exactly where you're going. You know, sometimes those are the best times. You know, like Pastor Josh, you know, just sometimes you just go. You just get in the car. You don't know where you're going. You don't have a plan. You just go on a journey. And so I love the definition. It means a long, at times difficult, but satisfying process of personal change. A long, tell me if this doesn't sound like being a disciple of Jesus, at times difficult, but satisfying process of personal change. The Christian life has so many seasons. On the journey, there are parts where you're really not even sure where you're going. You're not sure where God is taking you. You're not even sure why the things are happening to you and around you that are happening to you. And sometimes you have to stop and you have to get your footing again. You have to get your direction again. While being a disciple has the same foundation, the journey for everybody in this room following Jesus is 100% unique to you. But I bring you good news today. No matter where you're at on your journey, God makes us a promise in Philippians 1:6. He who began a good work in you will carry it through to completion. Somebody say amen. God is faithful. He who began a good work will carry it through. Rise Church, we're on a journey together. And while our journey are different, we walk it together. And that's what I want us to get today. We need to bring others with us in this process. Everyone has think about it. Think of the billions of people around the world this morning. Everybody populating this earth, every one of those people has a different spiritual location. A different place they're at in understanding God, understanding Jesus, understanding faith. And so the church's job, one of its jobs, is to figure out the location spiritually of the people around us and move them step by step to the cross of Jesus Christ, and then have them enter into a discipleship process. Now, a tool we've used for this over the years that you've probably never seen is called the Engel Scale. Something we found a long time ago, and we recognize, you may not know this, but most people, like I said, we had 3 people born again this morning. 2 of those people I've seen in church several times, but today was their day. Today was their day of salvation. Do you know most people hear the salvation message an average of 6 times before they respond? Because everybody's on a journey. And so this Engel Scale, I'm going to walk you through it real quick. Maybe it'll help you understand where people are at. Number 1, people have an awareness of a supreme being, but no knowledge of the gospel. There are people by the millions on the earth, they know inside of them there's a God, but they don't know how to get to him. They don't know the gospel. The second, -7, is a person who's heard the gospel. They've heard it once, maybe twice. They've heard the message, but then they move into number 6. They're aware of the fundamentals of the gospel. All of a sudden, they've heard it enough. They heard it explained in a way where it begins to make sense to them. It's simple, but now they're starting to grasp it. The 5th is they are grasping the understanding of the gospel. And then the 4th is they now have a positive attitude towards the gospel. And that is the pivot moment in the lives of people. That is when the gospel of Jesus Christ goes from being a stench to a sweet incense. And inevitably, then God, their creator, will bring the next moment to them. A person who knows they have personal issues outside of their ability to solve. Everybody has those moments on their life journey. Everybody has those moments where they come up against something that is bigger than they are, something they cannot solve on their own, and that is their crossroads. And hopefully they move to -2. They start to look to God to solve those things. And then -1, they feel conviction and have a desire to start a new life. And then they come to ground zero. They are born again. They accept Jesus Christ as their Savior. But then from there, there's 3 steps into the positive. And this is where the church comes in as well. It's a process of connection. Now, the people that came down front, some of them may have been Christians for years. Some of them, maybe this is the first time. They are beginning that process of connection. And second, new Christian is now connected into church life. They're growing, they're serving, and then the ultimate goal for all of us in this room is we become a mature Christian who's leading and helping other people. Now, not only do we probably see ourselves on this journey, hopefully it helps us understand, guys, that every interaction we have with others on our job, in our neighborhood, in our family, in our community can help move people along this scale on their journey to meet Christ, or after they've met Him on their journey to maturity in Christ. Even though everything may not have an obvious spiritual component. One of the most powerful things we do is church softball, David Gosselin. And some of those guys on that team are rascals. The more rascals, the better. Can I get an amen? I get excited because some of the guys are strong, but inevitably God leads David and some of to find some guys that have maybe given up on church. They've never quite gotten there, and they get around some people. And God will sovereignly use that to draw people towards a person or draw us as a church. Draw people towards God as you love on them. Maybe as you're loving on them, somebody else is praying for them, and it all works together to build the kingdom of God. But the bottom line this morning, guys, as your pastor, is I want you to know we have to stay on this journey. We cannot stop growing. We cannot stop moving in this process of discipleship ever, because if you stop growing, you're dying spiritually. You have to keep growing. And we have to remember, it's a process that we're all involved in. As a church, nobody has any chance alone in today's world to be a follower of Jesus Christ. You have no chance, because that's not the way God designed you to be. He designed us to be together. Now, in 1 Corinthians chapter 3, Paul has planted a great church in the city of Corinth. Like all the other churches, he went into an area that needed the gospel, and he planted it. But the church is starting to break down. The church is not working the way that it's supposed to work. And so he writes them a letter, and in chapter 3, 1 through 15, he addresses the fact that the church's growth somehow has been stunted. It has stopped. It is not becoming what it's supposed to be. And Paul says, brothers and sisters, I could not address you as people who live by the Spirit because you're still worldly, mere infants in Christ. I gave you milk, not solid food, because you weren't ready for it. Indeed, Paul says you're still not ready. You're still worldly. Now, how does he know they're still worldly? He gives us the marker. He says, since there is jealousy and quarreling among you, are you not worldly? Are you not acting like mere humans? One says, I follow Paul. Another says, I follow Apollos. Are you not mere humans? What, after all, who is Apollos? What is Paul? Only servants through whom you came to believe, as the Lord has assigned to each his task. I planted the seed, Paul says. Apollos just watered it, but God made it grow. So neither the one who plants or the one who waters is anything, only God who makes things grow. The one who plants and the one who waters have one purpose, and they will each be rewarded according to their own labor. We are God's co-workers in God's service. You are God's field, God's building. By the grace God has given me, I laid a foundation as a wise builder. When we started this work, Paul says, and someone else is now building on it, but each one should build with care. For no one can leave any foundation other than the one already laid, which is Christ. Anyone who builds on this foundation using gold, silver, costly stones, hay, and straw, their work will be shown for what it is, because the day will bring it to light. It will be revealed with fire, and the fire will test the quality of each man's work. If what has been built survives, the builder will receive his reward. If it's burned up, the builder will suffer loss, yet will be saved, but only as one escaping the flames. So here, guys, is a journey of discipleship. The church in Corinth had been in existence for about 5 years when Paul wrote this letter. It started out wonderful, but quickly, after a couple of years, kind of lost its way. And churches are so vulnerable Only about 20%, maybe less than that, of church plants ever make it, even with all the money, all the support. It's just a high level of failure because the churches are so fragile in those early days. And so the church planters, while working with church planters, you look for those markers. Lisa and I do that. We interview them. We talk to them. We look for, we help give we have three things that Pastor Jim has to give them: a green light, give them a red light, and give them a yellow light. And believe me, I've given some red lights, and the guys went on anyway, and I can tell you they failed because I knew they weren't ready. And so it's such a thing. So you have to, but after they start, you have to look for these markers. Paul had learned to look for spiritual health. He had learned to look for certain things, and he had learned to guard against certain things. And when he sees jealousy in the church, when he sees quarreling in the church, he knew that they were still immature. He's thinking these things should not be. So Rise Church, we have to never get away from our purpose. We have to stay focused on building on the foundation with this Christ together in community. We are a part of a body of believers that stretches over the entire world. And we have to remember that. We are part of this. You know, I told you we got to go to this conference with Pastor Choco, and many of you know Pastor Choco, where he preached here for 3 days ablaze, and we've continued to build a relationship. He was so gracious to Lisa and I, calling us while we're in Chicago. Do you need anything? Hey, I've got you seats reserved. Just rolling out the red carpet for us. So in this conference called Jumpstart, there were probably 600 to 700 people, maybe 50 or 60 pastors and their wives. And I would say less than 10 people were Caucasian. The other 600 to 700 were Puerto Rican or Hispanic. So Lisa and I stuck out. and so, but you know, I've loved environments like that. I've told you, I've been in meetings for racial reconciliation where I was the only Caucasian person out of 500 or 600. And I think God loves that because it helps me understand what it feels like to be in the minority. And so these guys just welcomed us. And there's a picture right here on the afternoon of Saturday, I believe it was, or Friday afternoon. There's one of the other non-Puerto Rican and Hispanic. She was from India. Well, what happened was we had a 1-hour prayer meeting. And all around the room were the signs of every state in America. And for 1 hour, we cried out to God for America. We cried out to God for the president, the vice president. We cried out to God. And you know what was cool? Because of relationship, when North Carolina came up, they would have these different cities and their mayors. There was one city, and that was Rocky Mount, North Carolina, with our mayor, Sandy Robertson, came up on the screen. So think about it, guys, 600, 700 passionate people for 5 minutes just crying out to God for our city. And that's because we've made a decision to be a part of a body of believers. We have decided not to isolate. We are part of a movement. And I think sometimes we need to highlight that more. I mean, think about it, man. The world is looking for answers. We are seeing unprecedented things. The war in Ukraine has gotten the world's attention. But you know what? Do you know that Ukraine is one of the most evangelized places in Eastern Europe? Can you imagine if Ukraine became the new Jerusalem? As families, we're hearing stories of families, Christian families being run out of Ukraine and finding families to stay with in Poland, and the gospel is spreading. Come on. God sees it all, doesn't he? He knows it all. And these tragic shootings, you know, I don't know that I've ever been affected like I have the last 2 weeks. The shooting in Buffalo broke my heart. And now this shooting of children is so demonic. And, you know, underneath all the noise, though, what I want to tell you, as always, God is working. God is using his church. And do you know that within 24 hours of the shooting in Texas, the Assemblies of God had 8 counselors on the ground, meeting with doctors and nurses. Can you imagine them? Small children coming in and dying on their table. Seeing these things with parents. Do you know that we, Rise Church, gave $500 to an offering, and the Jumpstart Conference paid for 3 of the funerals? $30,000 for those families. It's not on the news. It probably won't be on the news because that's not why we're doing it. We're being the church. And I'm telling you, you can't do that in isolation. I'm telling you, God is working around the world. Through the Convoy of Hope, over 1 million pounds of supplies have gone into Ukraine. Fire Bibles going to the underground church in China, all over. You are a part of that because we are a part of the body of believers around the world, not just here in Rocky Mount. And we need to hear those stories. And you know what? Think about it. Long before it was socially acceptable to become a disciple of Christ, people were coming to the church by the thousands at great cost to their families. Long before any mass communication. How did it happen? How did the church grow into this worldwide movement from Jerusalem? It seems impossible. Well, Tertullian, a pastor in the 3rd century church, wrote that non-Christians would look at Christians and say, look at how they love each other. And they would die for their faith and each other. He wrote, look at how they care for the poor. Look at how they conduct their business. How they restrain the appetites of their flesh. And they would remark, they're no different than us in their customs. They dress like us. They eat the same food we eat, but they display great character traits of their citizenship in the kingdom of God. And then another document emerged in the 3rd century church that was translated into many languages. It was called the Apostolic Tradition. Some might call it catechism, and it was sort of an ancient version of the Engel Scale, used to walk people from a place of completely being lost into a mature disciple of Jesus Christ. It had 4 phases. It had welcome, it had instruction, it had preparation, and it had initiation. In the welcome phrase, a Christian would build a relationship with a non-Christian. And they would go out and explain things of faith to them. They would introduce themselves to other Christians. And then in the instruction phase, while scripture memory was part of it, it focused more on worship in the church and how to demonstrate Christ out in the world. They would be asked about their opinions and discuss and attitudes. How do you see the poor? How do you see this? The goal is not parroting words, but a changed life. And then in the preparation phase, they would go deeper in doctrinal instruction, deeply study the teachings of Jesus. They would deal with demonic oppression in people's lives. It was often so prevalent during that time. They would see people get completely delivered and set free. And then in the initiation phase, they would be baptized and become a part of the church. Cyprian, a bishop of Carthage, wrote these words about the ancient process. He said, habitually, Christians would share economically. They would care for the poor and the sick, and the widows and the orphans. Habitually, they would engage in business with truthfulness, without usury, without pursuing profit to the extent of going before pagan judges. Habitually, they would be in community of contentment and sexual restraint. Habitually, they would behave with multifaceted nonviolence of patience. And so as you look around in the lobby this morning and at every campus, you will see something very intentional that we're working on. You will see a display of our mission statement, our purpose, rising up to make disciples in the next generation. To do, we have to set aside, like Corinth, we have to always set aside quarreling, always set aside jealousy, our agendas, and realize some water, some reap. It does not matter as long as we're leading people to Christ, as long as we're making converts, not just disciples. And our statement of purpose has 3 parts. We've simplified it. It means worship. Everybody say worship. It is a practice of worship that calibrates us spiritually. It reminds us that this is ultimately about a relationship with God through His Son, Jesus Christ. It keeps us humble. It keeps our hearts soft. It sets an atmosphere in our life where God can work. And then connect. Everybody say connect. To each other, to God, and to our community. And I stand before you today. I'm so thankful for digital discipleship. I'm thankful that we're on the radio. I'm thankful that we're on live streaming right now as we did at 9 o'clock. Tons of people watching. But I want to say this, you will never bring full life change if it's not connected to a real human connection. It is the way God made us. Bodily connection has to happen. And that leads to the last purpose, multiply. God is a God of multiplication. Everything you put in His hand, He will multiply. And we have to multiply by giving to Him our gifts, our talents, and multiply by bringing people into the house of God. I'm going to ask the worship team to come back as I just share a few closing thoughts about relaunching this discipleship process. And then we'll end today by receiving communion together as a church. There are 4 things to relaunch discipleship in your life. If you are not currently looking, have that feel, man, I'm not a disciple of Jesus right now. Something snuffed that out. I'm a Christian. I love God. I go to church fairly regularly, but I don't sense there's discipleship happening. You sense you need to re-engage in this. First, you got to abide in God's word. That's the personal part. Desire comes from this. Abide means constant, daily, reading it, meditating on it, listening to it, however you get it inside your heart. The second is you have to find a place to serve. We recently studied the book of James. We learned that faith without works is dead. And Paul wrote to Timothy, stir up the gift that was imparted to you by the laying on of hands. I not only challenge my wonderful people that we're down here, we're going to share this meal together, get involved. I challenged all of us to make sure we're staying involved. You know, discipleship comes from doing life together. Often means serving together. It's some of the safest, least threatening way you can start letting people into your space again, because some of you have stopped doing it because you got hurt. You got hurt in church. And you love God enough to show up on Sundays, but God is calling you back into discipleship. What a great way to get back in that flow by just serving somewhere and watch discipleship restart in your life. The third thing is we got to recommit to spiritual unity. Some here, again, stop discipleship because of an offense. Something happened that hurt you. You got to let it go. You got to let God heal you, because Psalm 133 says how good and pleasant it is when brothers and sisters dwell together in unity. And God pours out His blessing and life forevermore. We look at great churches. We think there's no conflict. Of course, that's not true. Motion causes friction. It's how we handle the friction. We will guard against jealousy and quarreling at Rise Church. We'll guard against gossip. We'll guard against men's divisions. And we'll fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. And if we do, we're going to restart the process of discipleship. And then finally, we got to look around our lives and push away distractions and hindrances to our growth. Not saying you got to spend all your time at church. Never would I say that. Everybody's in a different season. We have to make a decision, no more excuses. I'm going to go on the offensive. I'm going to say, I will not live in isolation. I will live a life of discipleship again. Hebrews 12 says, let us throw off everything that hinders, the sin that so easily entangles, and run with perseverance the race marked out with. But listen, guys, there's only one promise in the Bible that is not conditional upon you doing something first, and that is the love of God. The love of God, you have to do nothing to earn it. But every other promise in the Bible is triggered by us doing something. You know, triggered by us doing something. There is only one thing that isn't. Today we got to take action. We have to die daily. We have to put on the full armor of God. We have to take every thought captive. We have to knock and then the door will open. We have to seek and then we'll find. We have to throw off everything that hinders us. Today, we have to just step into the fullness of that spiritual discipleship with the rest of the church. If you believe it, say amen. And when we stand before God, our spiritual works of our lives will go through that fire. Will it be wood? Will it be hay? Will it be stubble? Will it be burned up? Get in there just as one escaping the flames. Or will God say, hey, well done. You stood on your post in Rocky Mount. You stood on your post in Wilson. You stood on your post in Nashville. And you did what you could to build my kingdom. Come into your reward. That's what I want for my life. Can you thank God for his word today and just give him praise that he loves us so much that he wants to be in discipleship with us? I want you to stand to your feet, and I'm going to ask those that will help serve the communion to begin to get in place. And we're going to end with, we've got plenty of time, we're going to end with some worship as we receive communion. Would you bow your heads? Because before we come forward, I want to give this invitation. Maybe you're like the three people at the first service. You say, you know what? I need to give my heart to Jesus today. Today is my day of salvation. Today I come to zero on that Engel Scale. I have been chewing on this. Or maybe you say, you know what? I was tracking to God, and maybe even I made a commitment to God, but I have drifted away. I'm certainly not a disciple of Jesus. I'm probably a convert, but I'm not even sure that. I need to recommit my life to Christ today. I need to leave no doubt it'll be the greatest decision you ever made in your life. You say, Pastor Richard, that's me. I need to commit my life to Christ. I need to recommit my life to Christ. I'm going to ask you to do something just very quickly. Just lift your hand. Everybody else is praying. Just lift your hand. God bless you. God bless you. God bless you. Anybody else want to get in on this prayer? Hallelujah. Wait just another second. Lift your hand high. Thank you, Lord. Would you pray this after me, everybody in the room, before we come forward and receive communion with enthusiasm? Pray this after me. Lord Jesus, I thank you for dying on the cross in my place. I ask you now to forgive me of all my sins. And I receive your gift of eternal life in Jesus' name. Can you just applaud God for that and thank him?